Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are hangingontohope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J, and today I have a very special surprise. We have a guest co-host, one of our wonderful board members and previous podcast guests, Mandy. She's with us today. Woo!
Hi.
We also have an inspiring guest, Luke Mickelson, founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, the largest bed building charity in the world. Luke and his amazing team have delivered over 350,000 beds to children in need across 47 states and 4 countries.
Hey, everyone. This is Mandy. Nice to meet you, Luke.
Nice to meet you.
Luke, before we dive into the story behind Sleep in Heavenly Peace, Brenda wanted to share a little bit about how she came across your organization.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I was picking up items at Grand Canyon City Serve, and they have a warehouse where they provide Amazon items and different things for nonprofits. And this truck pulls up right next to me, and it says, "No kid sleeps on the floor in my town." That's what it said. "No kid sleeps on the floor in my town." And then I introduced myself to your Phoenix rep, and he gave me the card, and we help abuse victims, and there's always children that don't have beds. And so we're always providing beds for people. And so then I gave that to a nonprofit partner that I work with for a Christmas event. And then within a day or two, I get this email from you asking to do a podcast. And I don't believe in coincidences. So I'm like,
right.
Yeah, it just stood out to me. And I'm like, wow. Okay. So I was like, we have to have this conversation with you. And then you were the first person that ever said you didn't want questions and that you're just ready to go do a podcast anytime. And I'm like, this is phenomenal.
Anytime.
I want everybody to be like this. So yeah, that's where we're at on that.
Well, I kind of know the material. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. I think I'm getting there with our nonprofit.
Got your 30-second elevator speech down.
That's right.
Yeah, we can't wait. Well, we can't wait to hear it. So if you want to go ahead and share your story, go ahead.
You know, what's funny is kind of about that, in 2018, the end of 2018, I was nominated as a top 10 CNN hero, right? Which, I don't know.
Wow.
Sounds
Amazing. That's huge.
Yes. What an honor.
It was a great experience, right? I had a lot of good friends I met there and still have friends with them. Anyways, after the event was done, the next day they assembled for just some training, some media training, and that was fine. But then they sent us to LA to meet with what's called the Annenberg Alchemy Foundation, which is top-notch nonprofit training. Because, I mean, we're a bunch of farm kids from Idaho. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was, building the plane as I flew it.
None of us know what we're doing.
Exactly.
We just do it.
We're all on the same page. Right? Well, the funny thing is they said one of the first things, it wasn't the first, but one of the first things they talked about was telling your story and how you needed to tell your story in less than 3 minutes. And you're probably going to catch on real quick. I'm not a man of small words or a few words rather. So I was like, oh yeah, no problem. So I told my speech, or I gave them what was supposed to be 3-minute speech. Well, like 7 minutes into it, they stopped me and I was like, oh, that was 7 minutes. I didn't feel like it. So your elevator speech doesn't matter. I'll say it. And you need to condense it down to as many short words as you can. So I don't do that very well. But anyways, that was kind of a funny story about trying to figure out how to condense your big, huge experience into just a few words. So not easy to do.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is not.
Especially when you have an abuse trauma story like mine. I've gotten it down to 3 sentences though. And people don't really, they're just like shocked anyway, so they don't want to hear it.
So what are the 3 sentences, if you can share?
I was married to a pastor that started a cult, started sleeping with one of his cult members. And I could go on and on and on, but gotcha. I just kind of start there and then they're like, what? And that's why we have a podcast. No.
Yeah, there's a story.
There's a story. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, the story doesn't end. It continues on. Yeah, it's a cliffhanger. It just keeps happening. So,
well, isn't that how all these start, right? You stumble on trauma or someone else's trauma, or you stumble on something, and like in my case, something you didn't even know existed, right? And really, my story's pretty simple. It's what started out more as a Christmas project, and even before that, right? This all started in 2012. And maybe even before that, I'd share a little bit about myself. Like I'm a farm kid from Idaho. I tell everybody that because I think that's important for people to understand. I think they see them on podcasts or on TV or whatever, and they instantly put you on this pedestal, right? And that's unfair to us, but it's also unfair to the person listening because it gives them an excuse not to think that they can do something, but they can, right?
Right.
If a farm kid from Idaho, still a farm kid from Idaho, can make a difference in one, two, or a lot of lives, then someone else can as well. And
I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and they all have farms and land.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good. So yeah, and you remind me of like a brother. I got 3 brothers, so.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Well, when you grow up in a small town, and especially when you're a farm kid, right? There's a lot of cool things that come from that, right? This sense of belonging, the support system that comes from that. Especially when you're a farm kid, you're out in the middle of the field and something breaks down. Guess what? It's up to you to figure it out. You can't call just anybody. So, you kind of learn to do things yourself, or at least figure them out. And I think that all played a part in how my story really started. In 2012, I was kind of personally going through a big faith crisis. Right. I was a member of a church and I'm from Idaho. So you served a mission for 2 years. I was a very big active member. But I think you reach this point in your life where you start questioning, not just religion, I guess, but you start questioning other things. Like for me, it was like, what is important in this world? What is important to,
right?
What's a measure of success I need to know how I'm doing, right? It used to be money. How many zeros behind your paycheck was a measure of success. And in a way it is. But when you grow up with a single mom, a single parent, and 5 kids, and she harps on you since the day you were born that get an education so you get a good job, so you get paid well. That's what I always attributed success to, was just how many zeros I had in my paycheck. Well, I kind of hit this stage in life, for me anyways, that didn't really matter much to me anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm there too.
It opens up this hole I felt that was what opened up in my heart. Like I just didn't know, okay, then what is important in life? And that just, when you ask that question, you start asking all sorts of questions, like what does it mean and why am I here? What's my purpose? And anyways, in 2012, I'm going through this, right? And I had been for several years. It just got heavier and heavier, right? And so while I'm going through this, and keep in mind, I had a great job. I was getting paid well. I had a family and I was coaching and I was serving in my church. And on paper, I had nothing to complain about. So you almost feel guilty that you feel this way. And I kind of was struggling with that, no matter how many pep talks I gave myself, ultimately I would just still feel in this pit, right? This rut. Well, at the time I was serving in my church in a position called a young men's president. And what that meant was I would be responsible for the spiritual growth as well as mainly the activities of what this young men's program, ages 12 to 17 or so, these boys, what we do for an activity during the week. Well, all these leaders out there that might be listening to this that run a teenage kid program, finding an activity that doesn't involve a screen or a controller or a phone is not an easy thing to do, especially if the kids are going to like it.
No.
Right? So it's always difficult to find some meaningful activities. And I've always liked to center it around service the best I could, right? We built wheelchair ramps and we mowed people's lawns and helped people move all the time, right? Because I wanted those boys to feel the joy of service. Well, in this position I had, every other week or so, we would meet with other auxiliary leaders in the church and we'd talk about people we were helping, events that were going on in the community. Well, one particular family kind of caught my ear. And as the leader, one of the other leaders were telling us about this family. The reason why it caught my ear at first was because they lived in a part of town I didn't even know existed. I'm from a small 4,000 person town. I'd ridden my bike all over this town my whole life.
Yeah.
I didn't, you know how it is, right? And
I'm from a town of 500 people and I'm one of 5 kids too. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
even more so, right? So I mean, can you imagine like someone telling you about an apartment complex in your town that you didn't even know existed? You're like, wait a minute, where is this place at? Right. And then she started talking about all the things that she noticed because she had paid a visit to the apartment, all the things they needed. They were hard times. The dad couldn't hold a job. He had some mental health issues and the mom was the local school bus driver, right? So she started naming off these things. They needed food. They needed rides to work. The kids didn't have any beds. They didn't have any coats to go. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Did you just say the kids don't have any beds like to sleep on? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, certainly they have mattresses, right? And she says, no, they're just blankets on the hardwood floor.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that just really hit me.
Yeah.
It hit me hard. Mm-hmm. And I thought about my own kids at first because I had 3 at the time. And I'm like, man, to think about them sleeping on the floor, that day in and day out. And then I thought about my Boy Scouts because that's the activity we do during the week was typically Boy Scouts. And I thought, perfect. Here's an opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands. Let's put a drill and a sander in it. And let's teach them something, right?
Yeah.
I'd never built furniture before in my life, but I wasn't a stranger to tools. I could figure it out as a farm kid. So that night I went home and took a tape measure and some paper and pencil and measured this bunk bed and figured out how to build it and went and bought all the materials. So when the boys came over on Wednesday night, we started building this bunk bed. And it took a couple of nights, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to finish this bunk bed, but we had a great time doing it, And to notice these kids appreciating the value of service. That was number one. But also to appreciate the things that they had, right? We didn't talk about Xbox games or computers or video game or anything like that. We talked about something simple as a bed for a child, And that really resonated with them, which was exactly the point I wanted to make with them. But then they'd go home and they'd tell their parents and their friends what they were doing. Well, all of a sudden, this little project that we were doing got out in the community. And when the day came to deliver, which was Saturday, we had like 20, 30 people show up at my house to deliver this bed. And I was like, guys, we can't send an army over to this apartment complex to deliver this bed to these kids. So I had to stay back. I chose to stay back with a bunch of other leaders, and the kids took their parents and they went and delivered this bed to this family. Well, it was such a cool experience for them. They told me all about it next day at church, and I was really happy for them. But I was also really jealous. If I'm being
I can
honest.
imagine, yeah.
Yeah, you do this big project. Well, the cool thing was like this hole that I had in my heart, it instantly filled.
Yeah.
Right? It just brought so much fulfillment and helping a kid out for something as simple as a bed. It just was a level of fulfillment I hadn't felt in a long time, and it filled my bucket really quick. Well, that was both an awesome thing and also not a great thing, because it's funny how life just kind of creeps itself back in. And, the next week you're right back in the grind, and you're right back in the rut. And it made it worse because I just experienced this feeling of the bucket, if you will. Mm-hmm. And now, I didn't want to go back to that. This lost almost feeling I had. So I'm sitting on the couch. This is the next week, going through this turmoil, right? Nobody knows about it. My wife knows a little bit about it at the time, but no one knew what was going on. And I was trying to be the big, strong guy to figure this out. Well, we were watching a program with my kids. This Big Bang Theory. We always watch that. And anyways, a commercial came on. And it was some Xbox game. I don't remember. But I remember thinking, because this was just, 3 or 4 weeks before Christmas, right after Thanksgiving. And like every parent knows this. They see their kids see a commercial about some toy that they want, and they know we're not going to get it. I'm not going to buy another Xbox, right? And I was just waiting for my kids to give me the pitch. And sure enough, they did, right? So the combination of me sitting in this rut and this experience we just had, which was awesome. And now my kids want another Xbox. They've got a bed. These people didn't have a bed. Just all these things were going through my head, right?
Yeah.
And the next thing I knew, I stood up and just started walking to the garage. And my kids said, Dad, where the program's on? Where are you going? And I said, you know what? We've got leftover wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed, and you're going to come and help me. And so, And so I got pictures of me and my kids, my daughter and her tutu out there drilling away, and my son in his Boise State jersey pounding away. We just had a great time. I did this not because I knew there were kids sleeping on the floor. I only knew one family, and we had solved the problem already, right? Mm-hmm. This was more about I wanted my kids to appreciate the things they had and to feel the joy that comes from service and the fulfillment that comes from that. And so we built a bed. Well, now I'm sitting in my garage with a completed bunk bed, not knowing what the heck to do with this thing. And my wife at the time said, well, why don't you throw it on like Facebook buy, sell, trade? Now, I didn't know what that was. I wasn't a big Facebook guy. But I said, sure, why not? So we threw it on there, and a couple of things happened. The first thing was I did not expect how many people commented and who they were, because I didn't know half of them. Didn't even know who they were. Some of them I knew. Some of them were old friends that I hadn't talked to for 20 plus years. That was shocking, is how many people commented. And then the next shocking thing was they all knew a kid or a family that had kids sleeping on the floor. Mm-hmm. And then they'd tell me the conditions.
Yeah.
There was one family, 8-person family living in an 8-passenger van. I mean, they just got a house, but that was the conditions the kids knew, right? They're sleeping on concrete floors or pallets or 2 or 3 kids to one bed. It was just really shocking that this was going on in my own hometown and the town next over and the town next door. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I remember thinking, I got to do something about this, right? You know, I've got this bunk bed and I want this bunk bed to go to a special kid, a special situation, because it was the one that, you know, me and my kids built. And next thing I know, I got a phone call from a friend of mine and she said, Luke, have you delivered that bed yet? I said, no, I still got it. Why? She says, well, I've got a family I want to tell you about. Because she worked in the social services sector and was helping transitioning homelessness and I think foster care, some other things. Well, this is my Haley story, and this is my very first delivery. Haley's a 6-year-old girl that had never slept on a bed before. She only knew the backseat of her mom's car as a bed. They were homeless. And my friend, just as of recently, a couple of weeks before that, had got them into this house, which is what needed to happen for us to be able to deliver a bed to it. So I got really excited about this. And so we loaded up this bed in the back of my truck and headed out to this house. Well, like you, I'm sure we've all seen poverty before. We've seen some form of it. We've seen transitioning homelessness and things of that nature. And I had too. But when I walked in the house, it was the first time that I looked at that situation through the eyes of a 6-year-old. What would it be like as a 6-year-old to be in this environment? Because that's who we were there for. Right. She didn't know why we were there, but we were there for her in a bed. Well, you know, you realize there's no couch or TV to watch cartoons on. There's no table to eat your Lucky Charms on in the morning. I mean, it was really interesting to see that and sad. You know, the only thing that was in the house was a hot plate that had a can of soup on it. That was it. And so I leaned down to little Haley and I said, hey, why don't you show me your bedroom? And she was super excited. She had a house. She had a bedroom, you know?
Yeah.
So she pulls us back into her bedroom and you can imagine what that looked like, right? There's holes in the carpet and tears in the wallpaper and, you know, there's no closet door, you know, there's just a bunch of used toys in there. But of all those things, the most shocking thing was what was in the corner, and it was a pile of clothes. And that's where Haley slept. She'd come home from school. She'd put on her PJs, sleep on her school clothes, you know, and I'm talking shirt for a pillow and pants for a blanket. And then the next morning, put those same shirt and pants on and go to school. You know, and first I got really upset. Almost angry, you know, like this is going on in my town. Heck no. Right. Right. And then I got really excited because of course we brought her her bed and we started putting it together, right? As we're bringing it in and drilling the screws together. I wanted to watch, I was watching her to see what her reaction would be once she realized what it was. And well, she didn't disappoint. I mean, once she realized it was a bed, she just erupted. I mean, she'd come over and hug these 2 strange dudes in her room, making all sorts of racket, you know, and then go and hug the bed. And then she did something I'd never seen before. She actually kissed the bed, this bunk bed, right? We talk about realizing a child's needs and wants before they even knew it, right?
Yeah.
And then if that wasn't enough to just rip your heart out, you'd look up and here's mom, 6 years of tears just pouring down this lady's face. And I was raised by a single mom too. So I knew what those tears meant. You know, I knew what each one of them, you know, represented the fear and the frustration and now the relief and the guilt's gone and all these things that this mother was going through. And you know what? That's when I realized, I'm like, whoa, this is way more than just a bed. This is way more than just a good night's sleep. This is about the family. You know, this is about, and then when you stop and really think about it, and I tell any podcast I'm on or anybody I'm talking to, I just say, listen, stop what you're doing just for a second. Give me 60 seconds. And I want you to stop and really think about what would it be like to be 6 years old and not have a bed, right? On the surface, it seems, oh, well, you know, kids sleep on the floor all the time. Okay, now stop and think for a minute. Let's talk about just physically, right? This Child wakes up every morning, I'm sure not well rested. I'm sure probably stiff, right? Right. Not in a very good mood. Certainly not ready to go to school and learn. Not ready to go to school and make, you know, good quality friends. You know, these teachers of these kids, they're pretty accurate and be able to pinpoint some of these kids that I know are probably sleeping on the floor. Their attitude's not very good. Their grades are bad, right? Yeah. And that's just the physical side of it. Think about the emotional and the mental toll of, you know, these kids can't have sleepovers. right? The kids can't come over and play in their room with their other friends. They're too embarrassed. And then they go to their friends' house, and not only their friends have beds, they got freaking throw pillows on their bed. What kind of message does that kid receive, right? There's a good chance that, hey, little Joe over here is more loved than I am. He's got a bed. I mean, just these things that can go through these kids' heads, right? One of the worst parts, when you and I, we have a bad day at work, or our friends, we got an upset friend, but worse yet, we got the flu. What's the one place on the planet, of anywhere on the planet, that we want to crawl into when we're sick? Of course, it's our bed.
Beds. Yep.
Yeah. I travel all over and speak all over. I still haven't found a bed that I like more than my own.
Right.
And that tells you it's not necessarily about the comfort, right? There's more comfortable beds out there than probably what I sleep on and that I have slept on. But I'd rather be on my own because it's my sanctuary.
Right.
It's my safe place. I had a friend of mine tell me, he says, Luke, it's interesting you call it SHP as the acronym. I said, why is that? He said, well, me and my sister grew up in a pretty rough home, rough conditions. And when it got really bad, my little sister would say, can we go to our secret hiding place, our SHP? And that was their bed. How ironic is that? These are the things when you really stop and think about a child sleeping on the floor, day in, day out. Every condition that you can imagine that bed's going to provide, they don't have. At least they don't have at the same level that you and I do. And how sad is that? How sad is that? And that's when you realize beds should not be a luxury, right? Especially when we know how to solve that problem now.
Right. I just delivered a bed to a little girl and her mom because we help domestic violence victims, but there's a lot of children. And we deliver beds all the time. And I didn't know that you did that. So on Wednesday, I delivered one. And I think a couple weeks ago, we delivered one. They'd been sleeping on the floor for 6 months. So even adults, we get them for, and it changed me.
Yeah.
Like I take them all up. Like the lady said to me, my daughter would like if she could have a little measuring cup because she really wants me to bake a cake, but I don't have any measure because we'll take them kitchen stuff. We'll take them anything. We get a lot of donated furniture. And, people hate moving furniture and doing that. Right. So we do all the things that people hate doing, even though I don't want to do it, I do it. And I just went and grabbed my own cup and cause I didn't have time to stop. And I set that out with the other stuff so that they could bake their cake. And it really changed me to think that people don't have beds. And when I mention that to people, it's surprising that I think it touches certain people and you think it touches everybody, but it just, I don't know, breaks my heart. And I think, you're talking about seeing through God's eyes. Like, look at that's how God looks at people.
Yeah. So. I think some of the problem is, and I get the same reaction, right? When I tell people, look, we provide beds for kids as our charity. Usually the first reaction is like, oh, well, really, that's not that big of a problem, right? Because they have no
right.
idea. And trust me, I don't blame them. I didn't either. But child bedlessness is a major problem in our country. People don't know about it. It represents, there's no statistics on it. Nowhere. Wow. The only statistic that I've found is what we've put together. We're the largest bed building charity in the world, which only means that there's not very many that do that. But the statistics that we have, it's greater than 3% of the total population.
Yeah.
So if you're in a town of 100,000 people, there's 3,000 kids, 1 million people. There's 30,000 kids right now sleeping on the floor.
That's what the guy rep in Phoenix said. There was a waiting list of 3,000 children.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow.
That's their ongoing waiting list. And this particular chapter in Phoenix, they build like 3,000 beds a year. That list doesn't go down.
Wow.
As you and I talk right now, as we speak, there's 160,000 kids on our waiting list.
Wow.
That's just our waiting list. And the sad reality about that is we only cover, geographically anyways, 27% of the United States.
Wow.
So
yeah, because we're a tiny little nonprofit and we're giving beds, with what little we have, like we will buy them and have them shipped I
didn't realize how terrible this was until two things happened. When we decided to be a nonprofit, because back after I delivered Haley's bed, I decided I wanted to build as many as we could. I had this list from this post I put together, right, of these kids. So we built 21 beds that first season and delivered them all before Santa Claus. It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
Well, the more we delivered, the more we heard about more kids and the more people wanted to help. So we did it the next year and we did twice as many, and this just started growing to the point where, okay, we got companies that wanted to donate. We better be a nonprofit, whatever that meant. So I had to figure out how that was going to go. You know how it goes, right?
Yep, I do.
So you put this
Mandy knows
together.
too. She's been in the nonprofit sector for her whole entire life.
You just get into it and you just, you cover the potholes as you come across them, right? Well, and then we just started growing. And two things happened. I started looking for other nonprofits that built beds for kids. If I was going to be one, I want to see how they're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find any in the entire country. I couldn't find but one. I found one in Charlotte about a couple weeks after I was looking, called Beds for Kids, which I thought was a cool name. And they were no longer building them. They were just supplying them as they bought them. But that was it. And I thought, man, that's really shocking. You can find a soup kitchen around almost every corner, but you can't find something for beds for kids. And then the second thing happened, which as I started sharing more of what we're doing, I got calls, emails from CASA, foster care, child protective services, all of these organizations that help families and kids. I was like their favorite guy. And they told me, they told me because finding a bed for a child is typically the single hardest thing for them to get. Isn't that crazy? Like of TVs and refrigerators and all this other stuff, a bed for a child was the hardest thing. And the reason why is because there wasn't an organization that was doing it. And even back then, CASA and foster care and some of these social workers, they didn't even know to ask the question whether they had beds for kids. That's how unknown it was. And still to this day, there are millions of kids that are on the floor and no one knows about it, and so my job is to raise awareness about this. And not only that, but raise awareness that there is a solution, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking just Sleep in Heavenly Peace, but that's a solution I know, right?
Right.
And people can be a part of it. I knew a long time ago that child bedlessness, it doesn't even know it's a real word because it's not, but it's a real problem. I knew if it wasn't going to be solved by some farm kid from Idaho in our country, this needed to be solved by the local community. And so we have always been very community-centered and community-focused. Sleep in Heavenly Peace is, it's a nationwide organization. But if you go to our website, shpbeds.org right now, you're not going to come to some big national web page, right? You're going to come to the local chapter's webpage because we want you to know what's going on in your own town. How many kids are in your own community right now that even know about us? Right? How many beds have been delivered? How can you contact the people that are over this Sleep in Heavenly Peace chapter in my area? We want people to know that because we want them to be involved. Our mission is no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. That's not meant for the organization to tell the public what we're doing. That's for the public to tell us what they're going to do about it. Not in our town. And we feel very strongly about that. And because of that, we now have 440 plus chapter presidents that we've trained. We're in almost every state, minus 2, I think. And we're in 4 countries. And we've built coming on pretty close to 400,000 beds.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I was going to mention how you were saying that people don't know what a big problem it is, but based on the statistics in Arizona that I came from, moms and kids are the biggest percentage of homelessness there. And that's not including those who, may not have beds, who might have a structure to live in. Like you have homelessness and then you have people who have structures and still nothing. So it's
Correct.
like, it is crazy. And I worked with this organization in Arizona where they actually take in kids to keep them from getting sucked into the system if their parents are going through a hard time or whatever. And they give them these beautiful rooms, right? Like these kids get these beautiful rooms while they are staying with them. And the CEO one time told me, she goes, it's so interesting because we will come in and the child will be sleeping in the closet. And I said, why is that? She goes, because they're not used to sleeping in a bed.
Yeah.
And it feels very unfamiliar. And it's scary. It's almost scary because their safety is their closet. And until they learn that this is theirs and they can be in that bed, and they eventually progressively start sleeping in the bed when they're ready. And I'm like, holy cow, like that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
What's interesting is
to be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.